Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing General Studies paper 1 in the recently conducted Civil Services mains examination, and in that we are going to focus more on the social issue part. Now my reading of this paper was that there were as usual paper 1 on the expected line, and it was basically more on factual basis in few questions and some questions were analytical in nature. So it is very important for us to understand the demand of the question while answering. So in this basically discussion we will try to attempt that. Having said that, let's start our discussion. So first question in General Studies paper 1 from social issue section was question number 8 of 10 mark, and it has question like, has the caste lost its relevance in understanding the multicultural Indian society? Elaborate your answers with illustration. Now specifically this question is asking about the role of caste in understanding the multiculturalism or multicultural Indian society. Now what is the role played by caste in understanding the multiculturalism? We must know that in our study of salient feature of Indian society as well as diversity of India topic. Now in this answer you must have a clarity of understanding of what is the meaning of multiculturalism. So again, multiculturalism is a philosophy or ideology you may call as supporting the presence of multiple cultures or many subcultures within the framework of single society. So if one society having multiple culture coexisting with each other, that society would be safely assumed as multicultural society. So for that, example could be United States of America, where different cultural groups, subcultural groups are coexisting within the American society. Indian society is an example of multiculturalism, where we have different groups coexisting with different subculture within the framework of Indian society. So again, as you know, India is land of diversity, blend of multi-religious and ethnic groups are always present in India. We have different states formed on the basis of languages having their unique culture, which is part and parcel of the Indian society, and that is reflected in the form of the food habit, dressing pattern, religion and culture which is practiced in these states. Along with that, there has been long history of unique geography and diverse demography in Indian society, attributing it to the multiculturalism. So you can briefly set the tone of answer by bringing the idea of what is multiculturalism. Then you can switch directly to relevance of caste in understanding the multicultural Indian society. Now as you know, caste is something which is a dynamic concept and you can safely assume it as an empirical reality. Despite of so many attempts made by different social groups and leaders, caste is still existing in Indian society and it has its role to play in understanding our multiculturalism in Indian society. So we will have to raise points on how our caste is important in understanding. So you can say that despite of many efforts by Government of India, which has passed Special Marriage Act, which has passed Hindu Marriage Act and other legislation to promote inter-caste marriages, if you see the matrimonial pages of important national newspapers, even the Hindus and Indian Express, you will find that they have a specific mention of caste present. So that shows that even today marriages in India are endogamous in nature, meaning they are marrying within their own group, and precisely you will find that this endogamous group is caste also, which is very dominant. So again, in understanding marriage, which is one of the element of culture in India, you can say that matrimonial pages of newspaper, matrimonial website is testimony to the fact that still caste system is relevant in understanding the choice of spouse or marriage partner in Indian society, which is part and parcel of its culture. Similarly, when you see education, education is an important pillar of culture, and in India you will find that there is a literacy gap between different caste group, specifically those who were treated as untouchable in earlier times, who are now ascribed to the scheduled caste identity, found to have very poor basically literacy rate, which was approximately 66% in comparison to the national average of 73.04%. So again, it is also a testimony to the fact that yes, caste is helping in understanding the educational attainment of people from different caste group. Similarly, we find that different caste has different modes of worship, but despite they having different modes of worships, they have different modes of customs and traditions. You will find that most of the religious ceremonies in India are still performed among the Hindus by the priests who are identifying themselves with Brahmanic identity. So, despite of various attempts made by various social organization, still the priestly class coming from one specific caste group from Brahmanic identity, they are trying to derive their basically orientation. Now, next is different castes in India have this tendency to follow different customs and tradition. Now, this customs and tradition varying from following of the basically tilaks put on the forehead, following of marriages, rules of marriages, similarly the death ritual. So, it varies and caste help us in understanding these basically different customs and tradition. For example, in India, the Shaivites or the basically Smartha, who are one group of caste in Tamil Nadu, have this habit of putting horizontal tilak in comparison to Sri Vaishnava, who are known to have U-shaped or vertical putting of tilaks. So, again on their forehead, these group of people have different style or customs or tradition of following different basically tilak on their forehead. So, again caste will help us to understand and identify this cultural diversity or presence of multiculturalism among the practicing groups. Then, despite caste has lose its relevance in providing occupation the way it was doing so in earlier time, even today most of the Safai Karamcharis, most of the group 4 employees in government of India and various state governments are belonging to the scheduled caste groups. So, that is also reflecting that caste is still having its role to play in providing occupation, and many of the people from lower caste are just changing their identity, but still they are forced upon to basically work in the same kind of profession which their ancestors were forced into. So, again this is a cause of concern for everyone. World Health Organization, World Bank, Water Aid and International Labour Organization has observed this in their survey, which is named as Health, Safety, Dignity of Sanitation Worker and Initial Assessment. Again, name is not important. The point is that even most of the occupation in India are derived on the basis of the caste identity of the people. Likewise, we observed that thanks to the efforts of Government of India and legal provision under Article 17, provision of untouchability abolition is there, then protection of Civil Right Act, protection of SCs and STs from the atrocities. So, in 1989 there was an act passed for prevention of atrocities against SC/ST Act. So, these were the provisions which has helped in banning explicit practice of untouchability and making it a legal offence. But despite of the effort, we observed that untouchability is still practiced in various tacit forms. These tacit forms including not allowing the people to have water from the same utensils, not allowing them to sit along with the family member while interdining and many other instances where this form of tacit untouchability is observed. Not only this, many of the people complain that because of their caste background, they were not given an apartment or a flat on rent in various metro cities in India. So, that is something which shows that yes, some element of untouchability is still practiced in a tacit form in Indian society despite the best efforts of government. Next is food behavior. Now, I found this picture on internet which basically says a lot about the food behavior among the people, which is different based on different castes. Now, food behavior is very important element of culture. It is identified with the culture of a particular place, but in India it is also associated with caste. So, when you see onion garlic free food or vegetarian versus non-vegetarian food debate, inadvertently you will come across the issues related to caste. So, in this example there is one Brahmin sambar masala or powder which is identifying that yes, there is some caste notion to the food behavior of the people also. Then caste system is also practiced in India among the different religious communities. Say for example, among the Muslims of India, there are Ashrafs, there are Arzals, there are basically other Pasmindas Muslims who are belonging to different caste group. Likewise, caste is practiced among the Christian in the form of Syrian Christian, Latin Christians and New Christians. So, similar element like a caste system is present in different religious community. So, it is safe to assume that caste is not only a unique aspect of Hindu society, rather it is a common aspect of Indian society which is observed in different religion and hence help in understanding multiculturalism in Indian society. Likewise, you can understand that there is a element of mobility in caste system and in Indian society with the help of Sanskritization. Now, this Sanskritization was studied by M.N. Srinivas, who observed that most of the lower caste, in order to upgrade their caste identity and status in the society, started imitating the behavior of higher caste, precisely Brahmins, Kshatriya and Vaishya. Now, if they have to imitate the Brahman, they started avoiding non-vegetarian food, they started having early ritual bath, they started wearing sacred thread, and over a period of time they acclaim themselves to belong to higher status. So, ultimately this is an element of mobility within the rigid domain of caste system. That is also a interesting study to understand the multiculturalism existing in India, that how different practices are helping in understanding the culture of that particular place. Then politicization of caste and voting behavior is also identifying itself with the multiculturalism existing in Indian society, where even the different rival castes are joining hand in order to gain the electoral votes of different groups. So, that shows the phenomena of fission and fusion among the caste system due to political involvement. Now, these were some of the examples and the topic you might mention in the relevance of caste in understanding of multicultural Indian society. But it is also true that there is caste losing its relevance in understanding of multicultural Indian society. So, you can say that how it is losing or relevance is declining in understanding multicultural society. So, you observe that the ritual status of caste in the form of purity and pollution is gradually declining, meaning the way higher castes were treated in earlier time even before independence, it is not the same way they are being treated, and the notion of purity and pollution has gradually declined over a period of time with the efforts of government of India. Similarly, decline in the role of caste in the art of Devi Dasis. So, again there was a custom or tradition you may call, where most of the basically societies were giving sanction to the practice of Devi Dasi, that is, or Devdasi, that is the girl who is basically of young age is being devoted to the god and made Devdasi, or it is akin to the consort of the deity of a temple. So, through this Devdasi system, there was origin of various classical dance practices which was now basically being appropriated by different groups and developed into the form of classical dance form. So, earlier there were only specific caste group people or the girl child who is being forced upon to become Devdasi. Now, it is no more there. So, that also help us in understanding that now caste role has been declining in this. Similarly, role of caste is declining in the dressing pattern post independence and specifically after the globalization, where earlier caste prescribed what kind of dressing pattern their member used to follow. But nowadays everyone under the influence of globalization and after independence, decline in influence of caste was observed, and it is reflected in the form of changing dressing pattern among the people also. So, these were some of the argument you might put in your answer to conclude that yes, based on the above argument, it is safe to assume that caste still hold relevance in understanding of multicultural Indian society. So, our objective was to basically issue argument or the points in favor or in against of whether caste is relevant or caste is not relevant. By basically having valid reasoning, you can conclude on either way. It is not a basically fixed kind of answer. If you have having more points on caste has lots of relevance, you can conclude in that basically dimensions also. So, this is your first answer you might have approached. Then second question is about the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated class inequality and poverty in India? Comment. So again, here one thing we need to be emphasized upon, that even before COVID-19 was there and was not present in Indian society or anywhere in the world, India was having the largest number of poor people in the world. So again, India was having the largest number of poor people, and as per the IMF estimate, it is not just in India, but across the globe, 90 million people are going to slip into the extreme poverty. World Bank in its report suggested and projected that 70 to 100 million people are going to slip into the extreme poverty. So, it is not just the case of India, it is going to be a global phenomena where large number of people due to COVID-19 pandemics will lose their occupation, will lose their job, will lose their source of income and may slip into the form of extreme poor situation. So, what could be the reason for that? So, you can analyze the reason for the COVID-19 accelerating the class-based inequality in India. Primary reason for that was the nationwide lockdown which was announced, which has put halt on various productive economic activities, and it has adversely impacted those who are engaged into unorganized sector. Visualize that a domestic maid who is working in the houses are not allowed to enter into the houses due to contagious nature of COVID-19. She is losing her occupation or source of income. Likewise, the hospitality industry, where large number of people were employed, do not find any kind of customers, do not find any kind of visitors. So again, they were basically retrenched and they were losing the job. So COVID-19 lockdown, basically nationwide lockdown, has adversely affected the unorganized sector, which employ more than 90% of the worker in the country. You can also say loss of employment and livelihood, where many business operations were to be shut down because of heavy losses, making large number of people unemployed. So because of COVID-19 and halting the operation of many business activities, it has incurred various losses. Ultimately, they have to shut down and there is a retrenchment of employees. They will slip into poverty. Then restricted investment in multiple sector. Because of COVID-19 pandemics, there was instances of restricted investment. The investment flow which was happening before COVID-19 suddenly got stopped or restricted, and this result into various basically sectors could not get the requisite investment and ultimately their growth rate declined, and that impacted the people. So, example is that state basically failed to invest in infrastructure like roads, irrigation and other economic activity, that literally halted these activities. Likewise, because of COVID-19, people got extra careful and taking extra care of their health, and this increases their health expenditure. Initially, when a person suffer from COVID-19 basically disease, they were not finding the requisite hospital beds available, and due to that they have to pay extra amount for the health basically, and this increases their health based expenditure, pushing many people into the clutches of poverty. Likewise, the conventional containment zone response to the pandemic is also held one of the reason for increase in the number of poor people because of COVID-19 crisis, because it has halted the construction worker, taxi drivers and housekeeping and maintenance staff, factory workers, etc. So again, if they are not allowed to move out from the containment zone, how could they go to their place of work and earn their livelihood? So that is one of the reason for the accelerating class based inequality and poverty in India. So again, what government did in this whole situation, what was the response of government? So you can say that, as you know, that labor is in the concurrent list, so both union as well as the state government can formulate the law. Government take an unprecedented measure from basically releasing of 5,000 crore from building and other construction workers cess fund to construction workers who are approximately 2 crore in numbers. Similarly, under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, they have provided subsidized food grain to the poor people who are specifically not having any source of income because of lockdown. Then they have increased the per day wages under Manrega from 182 rupees per day to rupees 202. Likewise, a new scheme initiated by Government of India for the street vendors who can take loan up to 10,000 rupees without having any collateral for 1 year because street vending activities literally halted due to COVID-19 lockdown. So, Swanidhi scheme was started by Government of India to provide collateral free loan up to the amount of 10,000 for these street vendors to resume their business. So, having this argument in your answer, you can conclude by saying that yes, COVID-19 lockdown has impacted in enhancing the class inequalities as well as poverty in India. But again, this is not just in India. Globally, it has been basically observed. This phenomena has been observed, and also this is also the time when government along with various other stakeholders like civil society, like international funding agencies, NGOs should join hand to work for the upliftment of large section of the population that push behind the wall of basically poverty and class inequality, and they have to make their efforts. So, that is how you are gonna conclude your answer. Then next question is about, do you agree that regionalism in India appears to be consequence of rising cultural assertiveness? Argue. Now again, here you can start your answer by giving a definition of regionalism. Regionalism is defined as your natural love or affinity toward your region. If a person stays at a particular place for many years, they have developed a sense of belongingness with the customs, traditions, practices of that particular region, be it the food behavior, be it the language spoken there, be it the lifestyle. So, they develop a sense of affinity toward that region, and this sense of affinity, which is natural, is what we called as reflected in the form of regionalism. You naturally feel integrated with that particular region because of the similar food habits, similar customs, traditions, language, and many other aspects. So, this is how we basically simply define regionalism. Now, again, in this, you have to provide both sides of argument about whether regionalism in India is because of consequence of rising cultural assertiveness. So, we have seen that in many instances there were different reasons responsible for regionalism in India. One such reason in India is regional disparity. Now, in India, due to lack of balanced regional development in the country, there are some regions which got utmost prosperity, and there are some regions which lacks in development process, and they are still underdeveloped or in backward category. So, due to this regional disparity in terms of economic development, those regions which got overdeveloped were demanding separate statehood and separate identity, and they were having example in the form of Harit Pradesh and Tulu Nadu. Harit Pradesh is western Uttar Pradesh region which is more prosperous under the Green Revolution time period, and their farmers are affluent and they do not want to be associated with Uttar Pradesh, rather they are demanding separate statehood. It is a regional demand. Likewise, southern region of Karnataka nearby Mysore region is one place where Tulu language is spoken in that region, and they are sufficiently prosper in comparison to other basically regions of Karnataka. So, they are also demanding separate statehood in the name of Tulu Nadu. Likewise, economic underdevelopment is also cause of regionalism, where regions like Vidarbha, which is landlocked and underdeveloped region of Maharashtra, Purvanchal, which is the eastern part of Uttar Pradesh, are demanding separate statehood because of their underdevelopment and economic backwardness. So, again, it is not the cultural assertiveness, but the regional disparity which forces this region to demand separate statehood, and regionalism rise observed in this region. Next is that after independence, you observed that in the post-independence India, there were Congress as a political party ruling the central government as well as the state government. So, it is the state and the union government which is basically ruled by the Congress political party. Now, after 1967, with emergence of Indira Gandhi as the Prime Minister of the country, it is observed that Congress started losing its strength in various regions of the countries, various states of the country. Many local leaders, regional leaders having differences with Indira Gandhi prefer to leave the party and form their regional outfit. So, due to this decline in Congress as a political party, those strong leaders of Congress political party who now formed a new regional party started demanding that they should basically given their due share belonging to their region. So, various instances were observed where different Congress leaders and stalwarts were raising different regional demand, and that boost the rise of regional consciousness among the people. Example of that would be that various basically Congress were formed. In West Bengal, there was Bangla Congress, which was separated from the Indian National Congress. In Kerala, there were Kerala Congress. In other parts of the country also, similar basically breakdown of state Congress party was observed. Next is that it is not always the cultural assertiveness, but also geographical compulsion that demand separate statehood and regionalism. It is observed in case of Ladakh region, which was originally a landlocked region having less similarity and contact with the other regions of Jammu and Kashmir. So, it was demanding the regional basically identity in the form of separate union territory status since very long. Likewise, many of the northeastern states, not just because of their cultural assertiveness, but because of their geographical compulsions, were also demanding that they should be given separate statehood. So, you can observe that geographical diversity in India is also one of the reason for demanding of regionalism. So, it will be wrong impression to have if we consider that cultural assertiveness is the only reason for rise in regionalism. But it is also incorrect to believe that cultural assertiveness have no role. So, regionalism is also observed in many cases in India because of cultural assertiveness. It is observed in the form of Gorkhaland and Bodoland demand of the state. Now, Gorkha do not consider themselves to be associated with Bengali culture. When you see the map of West Bengal, the northern part of West Bengal region from Darjeeling, Jalpaiguri and other regions of northern West Bengal were dominated by the Gorkha population having tea gardens. But again, they find their cultural differences with the Bengali population, and due to that they are demanding their separate statehood purely on the basis of their cultural assertiveness. Same is the story with the Bodo regions of Assam. People who are belonging to Bodo region in Assam have their separate language in the form of Bodo language, and they wanted to assert this cultural identity in the form of separate state in the name of Bodoland. Likewise, many regions were demanding regional autonomy within the framework of different states. For example, in Meghalaya, the Jaintia, Garo and Khasi regions were given separate autonomy. Likewise, in Tripura, the tribal belt is given separate autonomous basically organizations. In Assam also, there were various regions which were given autonomy within the state basically domain. Likewise, one more reasons for demand of autonomy is cultural assertiveness, which is observed post 1960, where the DMK government of Tamil Nadu started raising the demand of giving more autonomy to the Tamil Nadu. Then Akali Dal government of Akali Dal political party demand the same in Punjab. Then Telugu Desam party in Andhra Pradesh also having similar kind of demand, and Assam Gan Parishad and National Conference were demanding it for Assam and Jammu and Kashmir respectively. So, it is also a regional demand purely derived from the cultural assertiveness. So, you have proper basically debate in your answer that was regionalism because of cultural assertiveness or it is not. After having this argument in your answer, you can conclude based on your argument you have raised whether it is cultural assertiveness which give rise to regionalism or there were other reasons. So, you can conclude that regionalism is asserted in India due to different reasons at different point of time. Rising cultural assertiveness may be one of the reason for the rise of regionalism, but not the only reason. So, that will be a neutral conclusion which would be more appropriate for such kind of questions. Next is diversity and pluralism in India under threat due to globalization? Justify your answer. Now, first of all, we need to have a very clear understanding about the globalization and its meaning. Globalization is the process of increased interconnectedness which seeks to integrate the world into social, economic, political, cultural and technological aspect. In simple terms, globalization is integration of world economic system having its impact on culture, society, tradition, customs and various other aspects. Now, what is the impact of globalization on the diversity and pluralism in India? So, one such common impact which is basically observed because of globalization is it attempt to homogenize the cultural practices in Indian society, and this is a direct threat to diversity. So, one may say that globalization has promoted basically instances of McDonaldization. Now, McDonaldization is a concept given by sociologist George Ritzer, which is a wide concept regarding rationalization enhancement observed even in the food behavior of the people. Here, in simple term, McDonaldization mean that opening of fast food outlet chain across the world where food is prepared with the help of mechanization and there is automated nature of food preparation that makes it homogenized in its texture, in its taste and various other aspects. So, food is losing its human touch, and that mechanization of preparation of food and opening of fast food outlet chain has brought homogenization in the food behavior, and we all know that food behavior is part and parcel of culture, and in India there is a diversity observed in terms of food behavior. If you go to northern part of India, they have different liking for food behavior. If you go to southern part of India, you will prefer different kinds of food. In eastern and western part, different regions have different cuisines, different food which are diverse in nature. But globalization is attempting to end this diversity by bringing the homogenization. Now, you may find McD outlet, KFC outlet or other outlet chain open in different parts of the country selling their fast food which is having more or less similar taste. Over a period of time, it will threaten the diversity in form of food behavior present in Indian society, which is part and parcel of our culture and pluralism. Similarly, another term referred as Walmartization. Walmartization is named after a retail chain outlet, Walmart. As the name suggests, it is opening of the retail chain outlet across India or across the globe, where in these retail chain outlets, the purchase habits and the behavior of customer is being modified towards more and more consumerism. So, opening of these retail chain outlet ensures that everything is available under single roof that gives comfort to the people, but at the same time it is also promoting the instances of consumerism, where they are offering heavy discount, they are tempting to the various basically potential customers to purchase those products also which is of no immediate need. So, basically Walmartization is also threatening to the habit of purchasing among the Indians, and also it is affecting the pluralism of this country by bringing similar kind of dressing pattern among the people of this country. Likewise, Westoxication is a concept given by sociologist Dipankar Gupta, where there is a negative stereotype created in the mind of Indian population that whatever appears from the western countries are having superior quality and whatever emerges from the Indian basically culture and society is of inferior quality. So, this negative stereotype will also forces them to go for adopting the American culture in the name of globalization and affecting the pluralism present in Indian society. Then the book titled Clash of Civilization by Samuel Huntington is also one testimony to the fact that in place of globalization bringing peace and prosperity across the globe, it has created the conflict among the different communities across the globe, and it has taken a form of clash not just between different communities in the name of religion, but clash between the civilization. So, ultimately that affect the diversity of a region, that affect the pluralism of that region. It is also true in case of India. Post globalization, we observed that more and more assertiveness among the different religious community resulted into many conflicts emerging from different parts of the country, and that is attributed as Clash of Civilization by Samuel Huntington. and he observed that it is because of globalization. Then promotion of global language at the cost of native language. India is known as the land of diversity in terms of the languages. 22 are the languages which are mentioned in our 8th schedule of the constitution. Along with that, we have more than 150 languages which were spoken in different parts of the country and 544 dialects. This much of diversity is not seen in any part of the world. Despite of that, globalization is promoting the global language, precisely saying English is given preference over the other languages, and other languages are losing various basically speakers in large number. So, that is also affecting the diversity and pluralism in the form of language present in the country. Likewise, promotion of secular festival for the vested commercial interest. Again, nobody is against creation and promotion of any new festival, but the problem is that globalization is creating new form of festival for the vested commercial interest. For example, to sell their product in the form of cards, in the form of cakes, in the form of basically gift item, these global companies are creating various festivals like Father's Day, Mother's Day, and basically Valentine Day and other kind of festival to encourage people to purchase the gift and exchange this gift to the near and dear one. Now, if it is done with a noble intention of bringing people closer to each other, it is acceptable. But again, most of the companies who are promoting this have their vested commercial interests that give it a very negative connotation. Then we observed that these were some of the instances that is threatening diversity and pluralism in India. But also globalization is providing us a level playing field and global platform to basically exposure of our different and unique cultural traits. For example, World Yoga Day has been accepted by the world community, and through that basically we have promoted our soft power in the form of yoga. So, it is not just in India, but in different part of the world, yoga had got the acceptance, and that is not basically any threat to diversity. Similarly, alternative medicines in the form of Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha and other kinds of basically alternative medicine are getting popularity due to its no or less side effects basically, and that is providing platform in the global level by the globalization only. So, again it is not threatening our traditional forms of medicine system. Likewise, more interconnectivity and rise of intermingling is possible because of easy modes of transport, easy modes of communication, easy entry and exit from different parts of the world, different countries of the world, that is attributed to globalization. So, more intermingling, more basically intermixing also leads to creation of hybrid families where different cultural groups join hand together and basically their different cultural group become marriage partner, family member, and ultimately that is promoting heterogeneity, not homogenization. Similarly, new social movement for the rise of democracy, equality and fraternity, for example, anti-nuclear protests for LGBTQ rights are testimony to the fact that it is not threat to the diversity and pluralism, rather it is providing a platform for promotion of your distinct identity and your plural culture. So, having said these arguments, you can safely assume that interaction between culture favor culture hybridity rather than monolithic culture homogenization. In doing so, globalization lead to the creative amalgamation of global and local cultural trait. So, that is how you are going to have a conclusion on neutral node, that globalization is just a medium. Now, if you are using it wisely, you can promote the diversity and pluralism, but if you are not able to do that, it might affect you adversely in bringing homogenization, right. Next question is about customs and tradition suppresses reason leading to obscurantism. Do you agree? Now, in this question, you have to be very cautious about mentioning of the customs and tradition in different parts of the country and also associated with many religion. Now, we observed that many religion, many regions, many communities have different customs and traditions that are suppressing the rise of regional rise of rationality and reasoning capabilities of a person, leading to its obscurantism. So again, you have to give specific examples, and through that you can argue that whether it is doing so or whether it is not doing so. So you can start your answer with introducing about what is the meaning of customs and tradition. So tradition as a word evolved from basically Latin word trade, that means transfer from one generation to another. So it is believed that customs and traditions are the belief, principle and behavior with symbolic meaning or special significance that people of particular society continue to follow for a very long time. And usually you find customs and tradition are basically learned over generation after generation. Reason being, it has some symbolic values attached with it. Now, there are few customs and tradition which you can specifically mention that suppress the reasoning of a person and leading to its basically obscurantism. Again, it is not having any basically significance, but still it is practiced just because of the continuity of tradition and custom. One such example is caste system. Many believe that caste has lost its significance. Why? Because in earlier time, caste was providing them employment. So if you are born to a particular caste, your employment got secured. But now that employment provision or the role of providing employment is taken from caste, and now it is government and various other agencies who had taken up the task of providing employment. Likewise, many of the instances or features of caste are no more relevant today, but still it is practiced. And again, you can safely assume that caste by its nature itself is promoting inequality, where there are some castes who are essentially called as higher caste, there are some castes which are essentially called as lower caste. So again, it is inherent inequality practiced in the name of caste system. Now we in India have democracy. So democracy and caste system are antithetical to each other, but still they are coexisting in India, is creating a paradoxical impression about the Indian society. Similarly, patriarchy is in the form of customs and tradition followed in many basically ways, and it by its name itself is very much against the idea of gender equality, where you are giving more preference to the male at the cost of female counterparts. So that is something which is part and parcel of custom and tradition which need to be abandoned, but still continued. Similarly, in many regions of India, there were instances of Devdasi system. What was Devdasi system? Just now we have mentioned that it is an ancient religious practices, now mostly in southern part of India, especially in Andhra Pradesh region, where parents dedicate their daughters in the local temple for the service of the deity, and they were considering that girl as the Devdasi. And this is one custom or tradition. Earlier it was spread in many regions of India, now it is restricted to few places, but again it is not basically acceptable in present society, in present basically rational situations, right? You cannot have a rational justification for such thing, and it is in a way suppressing reasoning, leading to obscurantism. Then you can say that there were instances of FGM or female genital mutilation. It was observed to be practiced among the 27 countries including India, where precisely it is seen among the Bohra community, where female genitals were mutilated, and that is their custom, which is not finding any rational basically uh, support, right? Similarly, we observed that self-flagellation, which is hurting yourself, is a cruel practice which is followed in various religions, including Islam, including Christianity, including Judaism. And in India, you observed that during various processions, it is in the name of atonement of one's sins, many people have this habit of hurting themselves. So, during the Tajiyas, basically congregation, it was observed among the Shia community to commemorate the sacrifice of their basically imam or their respected leader basically, and this is something which is a custom which has been developed, right? Firewalking, which we have observed in many basically places of India, some people used to have certain wish, and if this wish are fulfilled, in order to have their token of appreciation, they are engaged into this fire walking, where participants walk barefoot on a bed of embers or stone that are set on fire. Again, many countries in the world have similar practice, which is also found in India. So, it is not just in India you will find such practices, it is global basically arena you have instances of these practices. Now, these were some of the customs and traditions which suppress the reasoning leading to obscurantism. But at the same time, there are certain fascinating customs and tradition also in India. For example, Surya Namaskar. Now, Surya Namaskar practice help in losing weight, improving digestion, get a glowing skin, improves sleep cycle, and even bring blood sugar down. So, again it has its health benefit. Likewise, drinking water from copper utensils. It is a traditional kind of practice observed among the elderly people in India even today, and that has the ability to boost our immune system and digestion. Similarly, in India, there was a culture and tradition of argumentation and debating, where different schools of thought used to have a conversation or a debate organized from time to time, and if a person wins a debate, other person is supposed to follow their ideas or their school of thought. So, in such way, basically customs and tradition, Charvaka philosophy is basically one such tradition, where it is promoting empiricism and skepticism over the Vedic tradition. So, this is something which is promoting the critical thinking in the mind of every person. So, this is something which is not against the reasoning. Similarly, there is one unique aspect which is observed in the form of customs and tradition, where transgender festival of Kovagam is observed in Tamil Nadu. Now, in this there were 15 days basically gathering of the transgenders, and basically they were commemorating their patron deity Ravan by marrying him in the temple. So, this is something which is promoting the idea of gender equality, be it transgender, be it men or be it women. So, that itself is something which is appreciated. Then Chau dance of Odisha or Chau dance of Odisha. Now, the dance basically is in the form of storytelling. It basically have the emergence or themes of Shakticism, Shaivism and Vaishnavism. So, this is a folk dance, is egalitarian and celebrated every spring. So, these were some of the customs which imbibe the feeling of equality, fraternity in the mind of the people. So, that is something which is not having any effect on reasoning. Then Kumbh Mela is a kind of custom and tradition which is practiced in India, where people have this sacred bathing which they believe is cleans their sins. But even if that is not the case, it is having a largest congregation on the basically every 12-year organized, and that bring basically some kind of cohesiveness among the community. So, again Kumbh Mela has a manifest function. Manifest function is it is going to wipe your sins out after taking a sacred bathing, but latent function of Kumbh Mela could be that it is bringing sense of oneness among the people who are coming for attending this Kumbh Mela. So, again its latent functions are very strong presence in society, and that is why it is still continued. Then the Buddhist chanting of Ladakh. So, again it was observed that Buddhist lamas chant and recite the teaching and philosophy of Lord Buddha, and that is the reason that it is included into the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage. So, these were some of the instances where you have presented both sides of an argument. Now, having said that, you can conclude by saying that all that is ancient and old is not necessarily outdated, and at the same time all that is new may not be good even if it is fashionable. You have various instances of that. Similarly, fundamental duties of India suggest that one should develop the scientific temper, humanism and spirit of inquiry and reform. So, both case you can basically present, and you can conclude by using Mahatma Gandhi quote that it is good to swim in the water of tradition, but to sink in them is suicide. So, again until the customs and traditions are not suppressing the reasoning, putting into the obscurantism, it is better to follow that, if they are somehow challenging the reasoning of individual, there is no point in continuing those customs and traditions. So, that is how you are going to basically conclude with this conclusion, right. Next is, how have digital initiatives in India contribute to the functioning of the education system in the country? Elaborate your answer. So, again, traditional education imparting system in India was based on brick and mortar model, where a student has to attend a school physically going to a nearby place. Now, this has been changed drastically after the digital initiatives in India. So, first of all, in that answer, you basically mention some of the digital initiatives, and then you will basically cover the second aspect of this question, which is how it has affected or changed the functioning of education system. So, again, you can say that National Mission on Education through Information and Communication Technology basically has initiated various programs. Like there is one program called as Swayam, which is of massive open online courses for postgraduates and lower, basically 9 to 12 to postgraduate level. So, it is going to provide free classes, free courses to the students. Almost 1 crore students have enrolled for such courses free of cost. Likewise, you have Swayam Prabha, which is about the 24/7 educational direct to home channels for basically various courses in the country, so that accessibility toward the education is increased. Likewise, National Digital Library to develop the framework of virtual repository of learning sources. Free and open software for education, FOSS, basically project promoting open source software in educational institution, so that they can be replicated in other parts. Likewise, eYantra, which is associated with robotics and embedded system learning to the students of engineering colleges, so that they can have an ease over understanding these complex topics. eBasta, ePathshala, National Scholarship Portal, Sugamya Pustakalaya are all such digital initiatives in education taken by different organizations and Government of India from time to time. Now, these were some of the elements of safe digital education you may incorporate in your answer. Coming to digital initiatives in India contributing to the functioning of education system, you can observe that in COVID-19 how beneficial this digital initiative comes out to be. When the schools were locked down, when there were no accessibility to the schools and teacher, digital initiatives were paving the path that education of students were not harmed despite of countrywide nation lockdown. So, one can say that proliferation of digital technologies is bringing radical changes in the way education is being delivered and received. The outreach of educational program is improving because now one can easily have access to digital technology, and even sitting in the remote location, if they have the curiosity, if they have the learning capabilities, they can easy access to these courses available on different platforms. Likewise, digital education is providing both teacher and student new opportunity to teach and learn, thereby ensuring greater participation in overall learning process. Likewise, Internet of Things is further providing to be one of the most cost effective ways to educate the young minds. So, again, you have your own financial restriction to open a school in every pocket of the country. So, rather than opening a traditional brick and mortar school, you can have this technology usage through which you can ensure the outreach of education to the even remotest location of the country. Likewise, the edutech companies are constantly working to find innovative solutions to increase the access to education by people who currently struggling to get proper education facilities. So, new innovative solutions were promoted by various edutech companies through which they can outreach or they can increase their reach to the masses or to the needy students. Likewise, digital education empower teacher to customize the educational products based on the personalized needs of individual learners. So, now it has given autonomy to the teacher to decide upon what they wanted to teach and what kind of module they wanted to continue in the present cases. So, that is what basically giving certain kind of autonomy to the teacher also to decide their own curriculum. Likewise, it has promoted the smart learning, where different digital technologies are being used to deliver the conceptual clarity among the student. Learn by fun is one such example. Usage of various graphics, usage of various videos to explain the complicated concepts is basically happening, and that is supporting the idea of smart learning. However, you can also mention in this answer that in the country like India, there exists already a digital divide where some people are literate, some people are illiterate is one story, but at the same time, even many literate people are not having the digital literacy, which is access to the digital devices and resources. So, that digital device is basically creating hurdle. Likewise, in many of the families which are having low incomes, they are only having few digital devices, and that too having limited internet facility. So, how could they ensure equitable education to their children if they have this limited basically facilities to basically give them access to digital education? Likewise, you can conclude by saying that internet has more affordable and accessibility is going ahead. There will be a greater convergence of digital and traditional teaching, learning mediums. The education industry will witness the proliferation of small, medium and large scale edutech startup who will offer a variety of innovative digital products to academic institutions in days to come. So, basically to sum up, you can say that digital education is a future for India that will take the country to a new pedestal of socio-economic growth and prosperity. So, in this way, you have tried to present a balanced conclusion. So, this is basically all about the today's discussion. So, this is our small minuscule efforts to provide you how to approach and answer appear in general studies examination. If you are appearing for, or if you are planning to appear for civil service examination in coming future, we hope that this initiative might find its place in your preparation strategy and you might have got benefited because of this initiative. So, thanks a lot for watching. Let us know your thoughts on the comment section. Have a wonderful day.